What's up everyone, Michael aka Spirit Shard here with an impressions review for Run Rabbit Run, a simple little 2D platformer that's relatively cheap. Although I don't know if I can even justify that price for it. Anyways, we'll obviously cover that in the video. Let's go ahead and look at the options real quick. So in here you got your sound, music, and effects volume, so you can just disable your sound, you can change your music volume, which I turned down because it was extremely loud, and then you got your effects volume. And that's it. So you can't rebind your controls, and there's no resolution option either, so come on guys, like that seems like a simple thing. It just started up in full screen and that's it. So yeah, I don't know how that's going to work on other machines. I'm running the standard 1920 by 1080, so I don't know if it scales with resolution or if it's just using the standard one or if it's actually a smaller resolution. It doesn't look like it is, but it looks fine on my machine. But obviously I'd like to have window options, stuff like that. That just seems obvious. And then obviously being able to rebind your controls, like that's just a given. Anyways, we'll go ahead and go into the game. So there's two areas in the game. There's the forest and the town, and there's about 20 levels total. And that's all you got for the game. Once again, it is kind of cheap, and so you can justify it that way, I guess, but it's not a very long game. Let's go ahead and go into level 7, I think is the one that I want to show. There we go. So here we are in the bottom left. You can see I am a little rabbit and I'm running left and right. You'll obviously notice throughout this entire video that this game is obviously inspired. It doesn't necessarily do much original, but let's go ahead and cover the mechanics. So we get to move left and right with our bunny, and we get to jump. Now you can't actually control your jump height, which is actually gonna be one of my first complaints in the game, is that if I tap the spacebar to jump, it just jumps height. There's no height control or anything like that, which actually limits what you can do with the platform. There are jumping pads and stuff like that as well, but you can't really manipulate how they interact either. And so it'll just always do your basically the same kind of jump no matter what. But anyways, what are you trying to do in each level? So you're basically, throughout the level there's going to be these carrots. So you're trying to collect the carrots as a bonus objective, but your ultimate objective is just to get to the end of the level, and then it'll go boom, you're done. And you're just trying to dodge the things that'll kill you, like saw blades, and later on it ends up introducing guns. The game does switch up the visual style of it a little bit, and it does feature a few different blocks as well, and there's some blocks that when you step on them, they disappear and stuff like that. So you got your standard run-of-the-mill kind of hyper-platformer type stuff. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting about some of the levels is there's actually multiple ways you can complete some levels, normally for the carrots. So this one, I could run left and go this way. However, I could also run right and go this way. And some levels will actually require, if you're trying to get all the carrots, to run both directions. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the levels is that while it has this multiple pathway and the levels are just kind of whatever, they're not necessarily well designed, as in they kind of use your standard kind of run-of-the-mill platformer tropes. As if you've played other platformers, you've probably done the exact same puzzle that this game is actually introducing, which is quite unfortunate. It doesn't really introduce much originality within its level design, and we'll see a little bit better in the town levels, but the game isn't very complex. Now, another mechanic that I didn't talk about is the slow-mo mechanic. So it shows this mechanic very early on, is that if you grab an apple, you can actually hold down the shift key and then slow down the game. And it doesn't actually affect your physics or anything. I guess its main point is to make it easier so that you can control better. And so it's like, oh yeah, I need to turn around at this point. However, I actually find the mechanic extremely annoying. It doesn't actually affect the physics at all. And so when you're running, it's actually easier for me, oops, I screwed that up. It's actually easier for me to just keep going at full speed because I'm used to these types of platformers. So if you're somebody that actually plays these types of platformers all the time, you're going to hate that mechanic. It's just going to be completely useless to use since it doesn't actually make it easier to make jumps or anything like that, which is unfortunate. I think it would have been a cool mechanic if it made it so that, you know, it's like, oh, if you use slow-mo at the right time, then it like increases your turn rate or something like that, like it changes your momentum. Now let's go ahead and go into the town levels, and we'll go ahead and look at some of those. The town levels do have a little bit more originality to them, which is nice. Go ahead and click on this one. So the town levels are going to be within the town, so you got these big giant jet things. Now, like I said, a lot of people are going to find the inspiration right away, but one of the more interesting things is you can actually run through the buildings, and it's got these different stuff. So the town actually has an interesting aesthetic to it, and the town actually changes quite a bit in its aesthetic. As in, the forest levels feel very samey. Oops, I died. The forest levels all kind of use the same aesthetic, and it's quite disappointing that it didn't actually do the same thing as the town does. As in, the town actually introduces different looking areas quite often, as in each level kind of has its own look to it, which is nice. That's kind of what I expected. The forest level has like 3 different aesthetics, as in the plain one that you guys saw, the black and red one that you guys saw, and then one that's even more bland than that, and it's just a bunch of gray blocks. And that's all you're going to see for the forest levels, and starting off on those forest levels is actually going to be a huge disservice to the game, even though I don't necessarily think the game is all too great. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the negatives to it, because you guys have you've seen the gist of the game so far. So what are the problems with the game? So for one thing that I want to mention, and I'm going to go ahead and select a different level for this. One thing that I do want to mention is that when you die, what? Okay, it just automatically started me on that level. This is another thing. This is one thing that super annoys me. The menus, if you click in one menu, it actually just selects the thing behind it. And so when I click on the forest here, it's going to select a level. So if I have my mouse here, it just selects level 6 right away. So that's super annoying. Anyways, on to my main point. Let's try and get into the negative stuff. So this is a level that you're being chased by a thing. Now, one thing when you die is nothing actually resets. The giant pushy thing resets because that's kind of a key thing. However, the spinning blade over to the right, it doesn't reset. And so it just keeps spinning after you die. Now, the way you complete this level is you actually do what I just did there, and you gotta run through there, and you're actually on a very tight time limit. And so when you die, and the thing doesn't reset, a lot of times you're actually just gonna have to run straight into it. So like this. And no matter how many times I do this, I'm just gonna run straight into it. And so I can't actually complete the level. So what I had to do is actually run left until I can get it to a point to where it's like, oh yeah, now I can just run over it. Sweet. And then, you know, carry on from there. Which is a really, really annoying mechanic. If you're gonna die, reset the entire level. Like, just, it shouldn't be inconsistent. The same level, especially when you're going for times and stuff like that, if you die in one point and you're like, alright, well, I just need to retry to get that good time, and you kill yourself, it's not going to be the same level at the same time if it has rotating or moving objects. Like this blade right there could be at the end, or it could be inside the block, depending on where you died, which is going to completely change the way that the time works, which means if you're looking for this for a speed run, that makes it terrible for speedrunning. To be able to make it the same on each level, you're actually going to have to exit the level. Another thing with the polish in this game is that in the level, when I actually, this is a specific to the final levels, I'm not going to actually exit out because this is really loud. When you go into the final levels, it actually disregards the sound volume. And so even when I had the music completely turned, sorry, coughed up there. Anyways, when I turned off the music completely within the options menu, it actually just continued playing music for no reason. It just like blasted it. It's really, really loud on my system. And so I got annoyed with the music, to be honest. And so I actually ended up turning it off fairly early. Like I was on level 7. I'm like, yeah, this music isn't very good. What it does is it rotates through a playlist. It doesn't really have specific music except for the final levels and the bonus levels, which I'll talk about in a minute. They have specific music, but everything else is just a playlist and it keeps going, and I don't necessarily like the music. Now, that's obviously going to be opinionated, but I feel like the sound quality and the way it's kind of acoustic isn't very good for the game, and it doesn't fit the aesthetic very easily well either. Let's go ahead and show off one of the bonus levels. So what these bonus levels are is it's going to be small objective stuff. So the first levels are all you're playing the saw blade and you're killing birds. That's it. And what you're trying to do is you're just trying to collect as many points as possible. Now, one thing I do want to mention about this is that while the original levels actually introduce a lot of like kind of fail states, these levels don't actually have a fail state. And so you're literally just going around killing birds or collecting carrots, which you do in the town levels. And that's it. Like, there's no fail state or anything like that. I guess if you cared about leaderboards, you can be like, oh, I need these leaderboards. But I don't know how many people are actually going to care about the leaderboards of this game, to be honest. And then once you complete once the time runs out, then it just completes it, and that's it. Now, I actually keep getting glitches in these games, as in, let's see if I can actually repeat it. As in, if I go to play, go to town, I think it was it the first one? Yeah, so it's this one. What happens if you go on this one is that the overlay actually doesn't disappear, and that's how they show the tutorials in the game, is they show this little small graphic. Now, in this one, this is actually a level that ends up glitching my game out. So, the overlay doesn't actually go away throughout this entire level, and after I play this level every time, the timers in the bonus levels actually won't end. Like, if I sat here for 40 seconds, it actually would never end. And I can go ahead and hit escape and I'll remove that annoying thing. But you also can't jump in this level anymore either. So, I don't know what's up with that. I know this is an easy fix for the developer, I'm sure, but simple stuff like this is kind of weird. Now, another thing I do want to mention is the inconsistencies in the game. So I'll go ahead and select another level. We'll go ahead and start on level 1. Now, this is how they showed the story in the game. Now, this only happens at the beginning of the town area, and this is why I feel like the forest levels should have been skippable, as in the town level is where I feel the game actually begins, which means it's about a 20 level game. The forest is all like tutorial stuff. Anyway, so he gets dragged off by a bird from the forest area, and then he's in town. That was the story of that. Anyway, so yeah, basically, some of the game has inconsistencies, as in, there was one level, not only with the death stuff, but I'm also having control issues as well. And so on one of the levels that I was playing, you had to run forward and kind of jump across these platforms really, really quickly. And I got annoyed with doing the thing over and over again because I just felt like I wasn't jumping at the right time. And I was like, all right, so I'm just annoyed doing this, so I'm just going to make a macro to do it for me, which I know that's somewhat cheating, so I might have deserved it. But the thing is, the macro, which should be 100% digitally accurate, actually failed to jump 50% of the time, as in the game just didn't jump whatsoever. And so the jump has like a very slight delay, or the game only registers your jumps at certain frames, and it causes issues with the jumping mechanics. Now, they introduce other things as well, like guns and stuff like that. That's why I'm kind of going through these levels. So the town levels actually end up being a little bit more interesting, but the forest levels are really, really boring. And for the most part, the game hasn't really been that challenging either. And so the game could actually be a very, very short experience. And so that's going to turn off a lot of people, especially since the game really isn't that polished. And the levels designs aren't really all too interesting either. Like, it's just standard platformer stuff. As in, they don't really introduce a lot of things that I haven't seen before, and the slow-mo mechanic's just annoying, as in I don't even use it. So, yeah, I will say the graphic style, I like the graphic style. As in the forest levels, they obviously pulled some inspiration from some other games, but when you get into the town area, once again, this is where I feel like the game really starts, they introduce this really flat style, and they end up switching up through every level, and this is where I feel like the game shines. Like, it's got a nice, simple graphic art style, and it looks nice. And it runs nice, as in, it doesn't have any performance issues, as you'd probably expect with these 2D platformers, but it does have those responsiveness issues, which is going to bother more people. Like, I would rather have the game running at 30 FPS and feel responsive, other than every once in a while, my character just doesn't jump. That's not a thing that should ever be happening. Anyways, I think I've already shown these levels. So yeah, that's kind of it. So what is my conclusion on this game, and what do I think of it? So I'm not particularly enjoying it, as in, I played it to get the review done, and that was pretty much it. I like platformers, as in, I've played a lot of great platformers, but this game doesn't really feel that great, as in, it just feels like a platformer. Like, that's pretty much it. It's just a platformer to be a platformer. And it doesn't really do anything to give itself personality, as in, it feels like it's just copying a lot of other games, and it feels obviously inspired, which that is okay, I guess, in my opinion, as in, not every game has to be this whole like original experience. Like, it's okay to have other platformers, and that's going to be all right for some people. Like, some people are going to be like, yeah, I just want a platformer to play. You know, if you're looking for a really cheap platformer, this might be one to pick up if you've played all the rest of them. But for me, I like platformers. There's a lot of platformers I have that I bought for relatively cheap as well. Like, even cheaper than this game even. Like, there's some platformers I bought for 99 cents that I extremely enjoy them, and I love them to death. And they're just great games, whereas this one, it doesn't feel polished enough. It doesn't feel complete. It feels like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's not much here to really see that's interesting. Like I said, if you're a diehard platformer fan and you're just dying for a new experience, and you feel like you've experienced every single game out there, while this one isn't going to be an original experience, it's going to be an experience, I guess, as in, it is a platformer, so that might scratch your itch. But ultimately, I don't really recommend it for the general consumer, because it just doesn't really do enough different that I find it worthwhile. As in, there's a lot of other games to try out in the genre. They're just outright better, as in, better design, more interesting mechanics, a better story. Like, it actually has a story. This one has no story. And yeah, and I obviously, you know, I feel like that's obviously going to be mostly an opinion thing, as in, I don't really care for this game, and there are a few hitbox issues as well. So if you do end up picking this one up, just be prepared for some inconsistencies. Like, the character box, I didn't mention this earlier, but the character box is actually a square as well, and so the ears count as your bunny. It would be nice to have different fading points as well as your hands, so if I get too close to that, when it switches to the idle animation for when I walk, and it switches the hand will actually end up killing me. And so, as you saw there, the hand just ended up killing me outright, which is, that shouldn't happen. But yeah, so final conclusions. If you're looking for a platformer and you've played every single other one, you just feel like you need more, and for some reason those other games and custom games and all these free other platformers that are just absolutely amazing don't really catch your eye, then maybe this one is one to pick up, but I don't necessarily recommend it. Even at its super cheap price point, it's not worth recommending. And it has a nice art style, and I hope that maybe in the future they add more content and stuff like that, and that would actually make the game maybe worth it. Maybe they can go through and fix some of those responsiveness issues. Like, they're all things that can easily be fixed to make it a passable platformer. But for me, you know, being able to kind of get stuck on objects every once in a while, the unresponsive controls at times, and just the general issues with the design makes it, I just don't want to play anymore. And that's kind of it. Anyways, this has been Michael, aka Spirit Shard, with an impressions review for Run Rabbit Run. It's, I don't really like it, but some people might. So I could be completely out there, and I just got ran over by a train. So you can do that if you want to watch a replicate run over a train. Anyways, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you see any other platformers you want me to check out, I love platformers, and especially action platformers. So like, you know, if you see those games, you're like, oh man, he would totally love this. Make sure to send them my way and be like, hey, you should check out this game. And I totally will, because I love them. And there's a lot of other platformers I should probably cover at some point. Like, I have a library. Recently, I just installed like a bunch of platformers. I'll talk about it in my upcoming vlog. I've just been installing like crazy. So, you know, I've been playing them a lot recently. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Let's get ahead and make this funny, get hit by another train.